Okay, so I really appreciate this warm welcome, and I'm so honored to serve the FFBC board. I met Matt Sinovic, Executive Director of Progress Iowa, and he's been there and had that position since 2012. And I mentioned to Byron that I have followed Progress Iowa for years, but I'd never personally met Matt. So true to his nature, Byron set us up or connected us, and Matt and I met for coffee several weeks ago and had a wonderful conversation. But Matt grew up in Kansas, and he worked on political campaigns and for the Kansas Democratic Party before he moved here to Iowa. And since becoming the first executive director of Progress Iowa, it's a statewide organization focused on research, education, and advocacy. They've grown into an online network of about 100,000 across the state, and it's truly the largest of its kind in Iowa. Progress Iowa works closely with local and national organizations and leaders to promote our shared progressive values. They've organized and trained Iowans to speak out and tell their personal stories about how public policy impacts lives, and worked in coalition to secure policy victories across the state. Matt is most proud of the work that empowers activists and grassroots organizations to thrive. And I believe that that's a characteristic that we can all resonate with. Matt lives in Urbandale with his wife, Stephanie, who I had the pleasure of meeting recently. And she's a senior advancement officer at Drake University. And their two sons, and I love this quote, Matt, who are objectively the cutest kids in Iowa, if not the entire Midwest. Grandma. 2 and 5, correct? Yes. And Grandma Deb needs to meet them soon. Please. Thank you. With that, please join me in welcoming Matt.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, Deb, thank you so much. You might have been able to tell from that last line that I had a hand in writing my own introduction. So, but it is objectively true, right? You should think your kids are the cutest in the entire country. So, anyway, thank you, Deb. Thank you, Byron. Thank you, Jonathan Wilson, I think, is on the Zoom for inviting me here today. I also want to congratulate Deb, you and Jim for being new board members. So congratulations. Thanks for doing that. And I'll say, after watching your meeting here and your leadership elections, I want to also congratulate you all on having a much more professional, competent, and swift process than the House of Representatives. So I don't know that that's much of a compliment these days, but it's at least a sign that you are doing something right. So it is a low bar. That's right. Byron just said it's a low bar. So that's agreed. But anyway, I'm thrilled and honored to be here today. Very familiar with your organization, with your work, and just could not be more pleased to be with you to talk a little bit about what we do as an organization and give you just maybe a quick, very, very, very short version of a training here at the end, and then about what a message is and how you can help. But we do a lot of these, so I would love to go dive deeper, and we'll talk about that too. But I want to first talk about this slide, this first slide. This is the March for Our Lives rally that was held at the Des Moines Capitol in 2018 after the tragic shooting in Parkland. When I should know this, but far too many students were gunned down. And this is a good example of something that Deb mentioned in the introduction, where some of the work that I am most proud of, that we are most proud of as an organization, is something that you might not have any idea that Progress Iowa was involved in. But we reserved the space, we helped do the press, we helped organize the speakers, and then provided a space for them to share their stories. And that is exactly what we do as an organization. We try to amplify and lift up the voices of as many people as possible. So this is just a good visual representation of of some of our work that people might not be aware of. David, you can go to the next. Yeah. And David, thank you for doing the slides. Yeah. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about what Progress Iowa is, what a message is, and then how you can help. So, well, I always want to start by sharing, where the heck are we going with this presentation? You can go to the next one. And but first, I do want to just introduce myself a little bit further. This is my family, my two boys, so you can see, the proof behind that claim and of cuteness. And Deb's right. I grew up in Kansas. I worked on a variety of campaigns right out of college, and then in 2010, I managed a congressional campaign. And in 2010, if you remember that election year, it was one of a few midterm election wipeouts for Democrats. And after that, I went to work for the Kansas Democratic Party, and a few of us got together and started to talk about how can we do things differently? How can we stop going from election cycle to election cycle? And how can we build power over the long term for progressives in the state? And as we looked at what other states were doing and learned about what was out there, we read a book came across a book called The Blueprint, which I would highly recommend. It talks about the turnaround that happened in Colorado and the progressive organizations that were set up there. And if you remember, I mean, right now, Colorado is I would say reliably a blue state, but that was not always the case. That was absolutely not always the case. And what they did was they built organizational support outside of campaigns, outside of the party structure, and they still have great campaigns and still have a wonderful party, but they decided to organize it year round and promote an effective message year round. And there's an organization that was started there called Progress Now Colorado. And that was the very first state affiliate for our national organization, Progress Now. And so we are now in 26 states, and we're proud to be one of those 26 state affiliates. I'm on the national board for Progress Now, so we're continually looking for ways to expand into other places. But we are a state-driven network. So even though we have a national organization, the state organization gets to decide the agenda, what message needs to work in that state, and then we share best practices because we are not on any one particular issue. We're multi-issue. Our expertise and our niche is on messaging and communications. So we tried in Kansas to get an organization like this off the ground. Thought it would be a great way to get started. There was at the time that just was not going to work out. But then I heard that they were looking to start an affiliate here in Iowa. And so I jumped at the chance and I sort of the rest is history. But that was my introduction to why this type of organizational infrastructure in every state, I think, is really valuable and important because I witnessed it firsthand. As many of you have, you go through from election year to election year, and you just think, well, what type of change are we really building toward? And electoral politics cannot be the only way that we influence change. We have to build power over the long term in the progressive community on a whole host of issues. So we don't measure. I mean, we want to influence the discussion in the public, but we don't measure necessarily our wins by on election night. We want to try and engage with people and get them to, like I said, to tell their story and build that space where progressive ideas can flourish. So that's a little bit more about me and why I really value this work and where I came from. And you also, my contact information is there too. If you want to take it down, I'll share it at the end as well. Yeah. So this is about what Progress Iowa is, and you can at the top of the screen there. I think it's a little bit blocked, but that's okay. It says our public advocacy work, and this is basically an iceberg metaphor where you see the stuff that you would see is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we do. So, for example, how many of you get our emails? Oh, that's great. So many opportunities for people to sign up for our for the messages that we send out. We send out a lot of information. We send out a lot of news articles, a lot of ways that people can get involved and share information with their friends and family to help promote a progressive message. But that is typically a way that people see our work, is the email that's in their inbox. But beneath the surface, and you can go to the next slide, we do so much. We do research, we do media training, polling. We help stand up press events for organizations. We work on talking points for local elected officials. We help people write letters to the editor. We are constantly trying to connect people in just so many different ways. And this is where we really come provide value as a part of our state's progressive infrastructure. And when you think of the word infrastructure, what do you think of? Typically, roads, bridges. Yeah. So that's often what we think of as infrastructure. And you're right about that, because you provide that space for people to, if it's a bridge, to drive and go to work, to come here for an event like this, to go shopping, to go wherever you need to go. And Progress Iowa is really the bridge between effective messaging and the people who need it to communicate it. And so if you go to the next slide, this is how the process works. So we rely on, we conduct polling. Last year we did, it's just over 20 different state-based message polling, and just in Iowa. We work with partners to, as much as possible, if they share their polling information, we get national polling information, and then we put that together and we try to come up with the best, most effective winning message on a whole host of issues. And then we are the communications hub for the progressive community in the state. We then take that message and get it out to as many people as possible. So we are constantly developing a message, delivering a message, which I'll talk about, Progress Iowa doing that directly, and then building community among progressive organizations, among activists, and helping them do a better job of delivering that winning message. So we sit at the middle of this as the communications hub, where we take the research, develop that message, and then get it out through partner organizations, elected officials, activists, directly to the press, and as much as possible, as much as our budget allows, through paid media, and communicate that that message to Iowans in all of those different ways. So that's where we sit in the progressive landscape in the state, and we are that bridge between a well-developed message and Iowans. It also is interesting that when you create this type of infrastructure, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where it's going to lead, and it really just creates so many possibilities for success or for people to get involved. And when Deb and I had coffee, she shared with me that she was part of the group that, or you were working for the state at the time, when the West Capitol Terrace was renovated and turned from 2 big vacant parking lots into the beautiful space that it is. And to me, that is that's just a good, real physical world example of what infrastructure can be, where you take this space and create this platform and this opportunity for people to gather, for people to speak out. And you just don't know what kind of good that can create, because now the symphony plays there. Now there's the Women's March was there. The March for Our Lives rally was there. We hold events there regularly. And when you create that kind of opportunity and platform for people, only good things can come of that. And that is what we are trying to do with Progress Iowa. With every bit of organizational strength that we build, we are that bridge or that platform for people. And that is what we mean when we talk about progressive infrastructure. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So this is an example of the coverage that we've generated across the state. We blanket the state in media coverage. And last year alone, in 2022, we have a group of about 115, 120 people who write letters to the editor on a regular basis. And they had published 433 letters to the editor in papers in Iowa. On top of that, we had just over 600 stories in the press that either were generated for Progress Iowa, or the majority of those were actually helped our partner organizations or local elected officials or other people get press coverage, and we track all of that. So over 1,000 stories in the press all across the state. And we also measure it in terms of a dollar value. So if you were to get it's called an advertising value equivalent. And so if you were to get an ad in the Des Moines Register, what would that, or if you get a column published in the Des Moines Register, what would you have to pay to get a similar ad in the Des Moines Register? And so based on that estimation, we generated $7.4 million in media value last year from those 1,000 stories. And that means that for every dollar that we raise, we generate $13 in earned media value. So, but we do it all across the state, and we do it many times most of the time without our name on it. And this lets me bring up a fun anecdote that Jonathan Wilson shared with me several years ago. One of the best compliments that I think we've ever gotten, which is he compared us to indigenous tribes who, when they were being attacked as settlers were moving across the country, they would, because they were outnumbered, they would wait until night and they would start fires around their encampment to make their numbers appear larger than they were. And Jonathan was like, that's what you are. That's what Progress Iowa is. You are, with a few people, because we have 4 staff that are doing this. You're kind of encircling the opposition with this effective work. And so that is literally what we are doing every single day, or doing our best to achieve every single day. So that's a little bit about what we do, and I would be happy to answer any questions about our organization or really anything else when we get to the end of this. But if you go on to the next slide, we can talk about what a message is. And we do these trainings regularly, so I'll give you, like I said, the very, very short version. But can anyone tell me what they think a message is in terms of communicating on a progressive value or for anything? Just give it a shot. Or what do you want a message to do? To spur thought. Okay.
A meme.
Advocate a cause. Okay. Yeah. To communicate an idea. Sure. All of these are right. We like to think of it as trying to do a few different things. So you're all on the right tracks. If you go to the next slide, I think it's there. Okay, yeah. So we like to think that a message, in terms of convincing enough people to come to your side, to have a winning message, you want to persuade, you want to motivate or engage your supporters. So you want to persuade the people who can be persuaded. And at the same time, you really want to deflate or really define the opposition, because it really, you want to stick with what your values are and bring people over to you. You don't necessarily want to echo what the other side is saying, because it defeats the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. So and that does not mean that you necessarily always go on the attack, which is what we'll talk about in a second. But that's the core structure of how we think about a message. And what it is not, and this is where I said you all are on the right track. What it is not is a list of facts. It is not just a fact check of the opposition, and it is not just a retort to the opposition. So calling them a name, something like that, and we see that. It's easy to think that is common sense, but especially when we have maybe a governor and a legislature that are doing some pretty awful things, it is very easy for us and for even our wonderful friends in elected office to be in a responsive mode. And that can sometimes be counterproductive when you're trying to bring people over to your side. And I always like to say too that the facts, I get some pushback on whether a list of facts can really be a convincing message, but what we've seen in research is that people decide when you only share facts without additional context, people bring their own predisposition or their own assumptions to those facts. So one quick example is the minimum wage was just raised in 23 different states across the country as of the first of the year. Iowa's been stuck at $7.25 since 2009. And if you just shared the fact that X number of people would get a raise if we are living on, below a living wage standard in the state, then if you just share that fact without any other context, then someone on the who doesn't think that the minimum wage should be raised might think, well, why didn't they go to school? Why didn't they get a better job? Why aren't they working harder to get promoted? They bring those assumptions to that. And so you have to not just recite facts, but you have to give that context, and you have to give that additional information and background. So that's really important too when you're communicating a message. The next slide. So this is actually how we deliver a message and structure this. Every single message guide that we put out, we published 22 of these last year. If you go to iowavoices.org, they're all available online. All our message guides are publicly available based on the polling and that we've done and polling that we have seen. And we structure our messages this way. We encourage people to share a value that you can connect with. And you can do that in a variety of ways, but from the research that we have seen, these are a list of values that people that across the board Iowans connect with. That you're hardworking, that you are that people have independence, that you have a history in our state or in our community, and that you can get results. So those are values that people generally have a connection with. So you share that value, and then you define the opposition. So you do a little bit of like that opposition work, but you don't lead with it. You start with that connecting value, you define the opposition, and then you share a call to action. So you're trying to get people to do something. So you're trying to get them to register to vote. You're trying to get them to donate to your organization. You're trying to get them to do whatever it is, the thing that you're encouraging them to do. And this is one of my favorite quotes, is from a great message expert. There's a link at the end of these slides to her podcast. Her name's Anat Shenker-Osorio. And she has a great book called Don't Buy It. It's about the economy and how we should talk about the economic messaging. But she says, sell the brownie, not the recipe. And I think on the left, we do this a lot where we're like, okay, well, we're going to, like I said, we're going to raise the minimum wage for 100,000 people. We're going to, insulin is going to be capped at $35 and that's all great. But instead of saying we're going to raise the minimum wage, what she means by that is raising the minimum wage is the recipe. The brownie, the actual treat that you get is you get more time with your family at the end of the day, because you don't have to work 2 jobs for 40 hours a week just to make ends meet. So you get to tuck your kids in at night, or you get to spend more time with your spouse or partner. So, or do whatever it is that you want to do. But so you share the impact that it has on people's lives. And that is the way you can connect and convince people, because that's that additional context that comes in when, if you just share those facts, it's hard for people to wrap their head around. But it's hard to argue with someone who wants to spend, more time with their family. Another good example of this is that Anat talks about is when they did testing on paid family leave, where that has a huge amount of support. If you just test on whether people should have paid family leave or parental leave, people are massively in support of that. But it goes even higher when the message is, we want you to be there the first time. We want you to be there the first time when your baby smiles. And that type of connection on any kind of issue is so critical when you're trying to convince someone. So if you're crafting in your newsletter and anything that you're putting out, think about how what you're doing will impact people's lives. And that's a good way to structure the message. So, yeah. Now, finally, this is a quick laundry list of how you can help. There's so many ways that you can get involved. You can share your story with with a friend, with a family member, with someone who you think needs to be who you want to talk to about what's going on in the world. And if you need help and those stories aren't always at the top of your mind, contact us. We can help you walk through that. We do that all the time. We're constantly helping people work through talking points, work through, honestly, discussion points when they're having different meetings that they're having. So we love to have that kind of communication. So I've also seen it where people are, they don't necessarily think that they have a story to share, but literally everyone does. I mean, if you pay taxes, if you have ever had to deal with an awful insurance company, if there's so many different things that are impacted by public policy and politics that we just get in this mode of we're living our life and we go about it day to day and don't think necessarily that we have something to offer or share in terms of the public discussion, but every single person absolutely does if they're willing and interested in doing that. You can join Progress Iowa. If you can text. I've had this on every single slide. I hope so. Has anyone texted that yet? Okay. Text FFBC to 515-303-8591, and you can get added, and then you'll get a link to sign up for our email list and a link to donate too, if you choose to do so. You can write a letter to the editor. We can help you with that. You can attend a training. You can have me or one of our staff members attend an organization that you work with. We'll come and speak. We'll put on a media training. We'll put on a storyteller training for you that's much more in depth, and you'll leave with a recorded video that you'll get to practice, so you can take home and learn how to better tell your story. And the last thing I would say is just not to give up. And I know that is I don't want to just by saying that, but this last year was this last year was a tough election in Iowa. And when you look around and see maybe what's going on in the House of Representatives or what's about to happen in the state legislature, it is easy to get to think, what is the impact of the work that we're doing in terms of advocating for what we believe in? But I will always and firmly believe that the work is worth it. Because you just, like I said earlier, you do not know the positive impact that you are going to have. I'll go back to the slide for the picture of that March for Our Lives rally in the space that was created by the state when Deb was working there. I mean, one of the students who spoke there is now working in the White House. One of the scholarship recipients and you all have done so much great work, providing so much support for people over for the last however many years, since 96. Is that right? Yeah. Right. And one of those is now the Democratic leader in the state Senate, a scholarship recipient. I didn't know that Zach Walls was a scholarship recipient until this morning, but you just do not know what kind of impact you're going to have on people when you encourage them and when you give them support and encourage them to stand up for what they believe in, to share their story. And to take on these leadership roles. We host I didn't mention this, or I didn't go into detail on this, but that second to last bullet, we host a weekly letter writing call, Mondays at 4. We host a weekly briefing for any activist that wants to join, Fridays at 1:30, where we give a message of the week. We have a legislative update. We have a speaker on every week. And so all of these places are where people can gather and get informed. And our letter writers, there's people who have been elected to city council, school board. One is now becoming a state senator this term. So you just don't know what's going to happen when you empower people. So it is always worth continuing this fight and continuing to stand up for what we believe in, because even just doing that is going to have positive impacts down the line. So that's all I have. And so thank you for listening. I hope I think we'll send out these slides. I have a little bit of homework for you. So I have a couple of articles that I really like, or an article that I really like is a fable called Please All, Please None. And it's a great messaging allegory. I'll say that. And then an example of a commercial that I really like too, when I'm trying to convince people to not just recite a list of facts, it's actually a VRBO commercial where instead of saying they have the cheapest, and most accessible, whatever, housing, for vacations, they talk about the ad is just like, here's the living room where, where your family is going to gather to, to play board games on vacation or whatever. They're trying to share what that impact is going to be when you have that experience. So it's a really good example of connecting in that way. And then lastly, the podcast Words to Win By is the podcast from Not Schenker Osorio. She's run campaigns around the world, including abortion rights campaign that won in Ireland. She helped with campaigns in red states like Indiana and even more swing states like Minnesota, on a variety of issues. So it's really, she gives real world examples during each episode. So I would strongly encourage you to listen to that too. But we can leave this slide up if that's all right, and you can have my contact information if you want it. But I'd be happy to take any questions that you've got, or or discuss anything. Yes, Stephen.
I never said that Iowa elected United States Senator based upon all neighbors feel the image being castrating a pig. We now elected a Iowa Attorney General with the message of, I'll give them the bird, meaning I'll give.
Where are the rest of us?
So the question that Stephen asked is, and Stephen is one of our great supporters, so thank you for that too. But is it time to reassess the Iowa voter? Is that right? Okay, yeah. Right. And I think this is a good example. And I would say that they sometimes do a better job of connecting emotionally and on things that aren't necessarily, like you, Stephen said that for folks on Zoom, he said it doesn't connect with him. That, to be clear, that does not connect with me either. The make them squeal ad or Brenna Bird's give him the bird ad does not appeal to me either. But the example I think we can take from that is that we're not going to be able to, I don't think we're going to be able to win by saying we're capping insulin at $35. We're going to be able to win by connecting on an emotional level and communicating to people, how are we improving your life? Because we cannot assume that they're going to know that. We just can't. There's too much news in the world. There's too much going on. We have to drive that point home in a very clear way. So I think, I think reassessing the voter, it's an interesting question, but I think it's just we need to constantly reassess how we communicate with people and connect with them, on where they're coming from. Yeah. Yes.
I think he's 40 years old.
Yeah.
Close. They see us. Yeah, but all the people on Zoom.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, no. So what was just shared is that we need to connect with people about what is going on, so they can be informed about what's happening, because they might not know about it till years later. And I think that's exactly right, and it's exactly the point. When we say that we want our message to engage and motivate our base, I think that is what I like. Groups like Connie's wonderful. We work with Interfaith Alliance all the time. But groups like ours, like Interfaith Alliance, and can do is we want to get information to the people who are our core supporters, but in a way that can connect emotionally with people and get that message out. So, because people don't realize, if you don't know what policy is going into place, then it's 2-3 years down the line and something happens, well, why, they don't know. Yeah. They don't know why it is. So I agree with that.
We have to have mic that can pass around, or the microphone is mic. So that the people at home can hear it. Yeah. It's a beautiful space to.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. So what was also shared is that the cost of higher education is just going through the roof, and the question is like, do you want your kids to, pay or be in debt or loans for $100,000? And that's exactly right. That's a good example of what can happen, or an impact that can happen. And I think, just off the top of my head, like sharing that people are going to have to pay $100,000 is different than saying your son, your daughter, niece, nephew, whatever. They're not going to be able to buy a house like you did until they're 40 or older. Like they're not going to be able to buy a new car. I'm 41. I've never had a brand new car. And that's like, I mean, I paid off my student loans a few years ago, but that's fine. I mean, we own a home, which is great. But like there are expenses that people don't make anymore because they're in debt so much. So I think sharing that kind of thing, like even just a little bit differently, is a way that you can show that impact. Stephen, yeah.
Well, we're not going to know about funding. It's not like it's going to come up. I mean, unless we go to their website. Well, they probably write contracts with politicians for services.
Yeah. So, Stephen's asking me, just for the folks on the Zoom, what we should expect in the legislature, especially in terms of the LGBTQ community, and like it's going to be bad. And I would agree. I mean, I think and we work, I'll say this too. I didn't share this in the presentation, but Progress Iowa, we don't lobby. We're not, no one in our organization is registered to lobby. We decided many years ago that there are a number of organizations, including One Iowa, including Iowa Safe Schools, that have lobbyists present at the Capitol that we work very regularly with. And so we provide like messaging and communication support. So they would know, a lot of my friends who lobby would know much more detail than I would, but what they are sharing with me is that anything is very possible right now. And even if it's not apparent at the beginning of session, like there's always, trades that are made or deals that are made later on. So it's going to be a tough session, I think. So, yeah, but even more important that we speak out and like I said, at the end, like to keep advocating against bad policies and for good policies, because we have to make our voices heard, even when we may think we know the outcome. You'd never know what you're going to impact, and you never know what type of organizational strength, what type of future activism, what type of good you're going to create by continuing to speak out. So I think it is always worth it to do that. But yeah, it's going to be a rocky few months, I think. For the legislative session. For the legislative session, yeah.
In Catholic schools, they have now banned any use of the pronouns, and bathroom must be you must go to the bathroom assigned to you from your gender. So they've just made that announcement. I think that's kind of the spear point of where the legislature is. Transsexuals especially, they're going to go after the weakest link first. And so
yeah, I think, and what we've been hearing for months, and what we're expect to see, is that there's going to be some kind of voucher proposal again this year. They call it this is where the other side does a good job of this. They call it a scholarship. I think it's Students First Scholarship or something like that. And when you say that, like, it's who would be opposed to that, right? But it is it's all the tax dollar money without any of the accountability, without any of the accessibility, and they want to be able to, you know, turn away whoever they want and set up whatever discriminatory policies they want using our tax dollars to do that. And that's not okay. So no, it's a good point. And I think is setting up, there's a whole, we do a lot of work about the courts too, and advocacy about the courts. And it's very interesting and terrifying too, what's happening with some of these court decisions where they're turning this stuff back to the states, and that creates a breeding ground for things like segregation based on all sorts of things, you know, on whether it's on a sexual orientation or any, you know, anything else, like opens up the door to segregation and all kinds of different awful policies at a state level that they have not been able to have happen at a federal level. So do we have any, okay. We're past. Okay. Sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Walk